year was 1863. America was splitting itself apart in the fires of civil war, brother against brother, blood staining the fields from Pennsylvania to Tennessee. Soldiers marched, cannons roared, and entire towns mourned the sons they would never see again. But amid the chaos of war, some evils thrived quietly, hidden in the shadows. Evils not forged by bullets and bayonets, but by ritual, superstition, and generations of whispered darkness. In the quiet back roads of North Carolina, away from the main theaters of battle, stood a sprawling estate that seemed untouched by the outside world. Locals called it simply the Carver Place, a mansion of brick and timber, older than the nation itself, surrounded by skeletal oaks that clawed at the sky. To outsiders, the Carvers were wealthy landowners. Cotton, tobacco, and timber had filled their coffers. Their name carried weight in courthouse records and banking ledgers. But to those who lived in the shadow of their estate, the sharecroppers, the house servants, and the neighboring townsfolk, the Carvers were something else entirely. They were cursed. The story was always told in whispers. Around hearths in winter, when the wind howled through broken shutters. In hushed tones at the town tavern, where men swore they had seen lanterns flicker at ungodly hours in the upper windows of the mansion. In the hushed sobs of mothers, warning their daughters never to accept a Carver's hand in marriage. The Carvers, it was said, carried within their bloodline an ancient hunger, a ritual older than the Republic, older even than the colonies themselves. It always came back to the wedding night. For in 1863, while the rest of the nation bled and burned, the Carvers prepared once more for a marriage that would bind them not only in wealth and name, but in ritual. It was said that every Carver wedding ended in a night unlike any other in America, dark, grotesque, terrifying. The bride entered the house as a woman, but if she walked out again, she was never the same. Travelers passing through the town of Ashford often noted the way people spoke of the Carvers. Some stories contradicted one another, some were exaggerated, but a pattern emerged. One shopkeeper swore his grandfather had seen a young bride carried limp and unconscious from the Carver estate, her wedding dress stained with something dark, whether blood or wine, no one could be sure. Another claimed that Carver women never appeared in public after marriage, as though they were hidden away or silenced, and always there were the sounds. The Carver wails, they were called, echoing screams carried on the night wind, timed, with wedding feasts that ended too early or carriages that arrived with brides who were never seen again. The local preacher refused to speak of the family from the pulpit. When asked, he only muttered a verse about unclean bloodlines and wicked covenants. Parents warned their daughters to stay away from the Carver men, though the allure of wealth often drowned out such warnings. The war had taken many men, and for a poor farm girl, a Carver proposal could mean security. But security at what cost? The Carver family traced its roots back to England long before the Revolution. They were said to have arrived not as simple settlers, but with strange books, foreign relics, and a determination to keep their traditions alive in the New World. Their first estate was built in the 1700s, and though the structure had been expanded and remodeled over time, the original foundation still stood, a foundation said to be laid upon land taken from the Tuscarora tribe. Land the native people believed was sacred, even forbidden. Some claimed that the Carvers' wealth was not merely from tobacco or trade, but from something darker: pacts, promises, bargains struck in blood. Even their allies admitted that they had a knack for survival. Plagues, droughts, and raids that broke lesser families seemed only to strengthen the Carvers. Enemies who crossed them often met unfortunate fates: sudden illness, ruined fortunes, unexplained accidents, and always it came back to the women. Carver brides were chosen carefully, often from outside families. Once married, They were brought into the estate, their names entered into the family Bible, their lives absorbed into the lineage. Some bore children, some did not. But each one, it was whispered, was bound by the same night of horror, the wedding night that sealed their place in the family, not through love, but through ritual. By 1863, the Civil War had made the South a graveyard. Farms burned, cities starved, and the sound of marching boots was never far away. Yet the Carver estate seemed immune. Their fields still grew. Their livestock thrived. Carver men had gone to fight, yes, but their wealth, their influence, remained untouched. Some soldiers bivouacked nearby spoke of seeing strange lights from the mansion. A few never returned from wandering too close to the estate. In a land where faith and superstition were tightly woven, the Carvers became a whispered explanation for misfortune. Daughters who disappeared were said to have been taken by the family. Crops that failed in neighboring fields were blamed on Carver curses. The Civil War itself, some claimed, was simply America's punishment for tolerating such families in its midst. It was in this year, 1863, that the Carvers prepared for another wedding. Word spread quickly. Young Eleanor Whitfield, daughter of a modest merchant family, had been chosen as the bride of Nathaniel Carver, the eldest son. For many it was shocking. Eleanor was known for her kindness, her beauty, her laugh that lit up a room. Why would her parents agree to give her to the Carvers? The answer, as always, was money. The Whitfields were drowning in debt, their business strangled by the war. A Carver union meant survival, security, a way out. To Eleanor, however, it was a death sentence whispered behind her back. As the wedding day approached, townsfolk gossiped more fiercely than ever. Some pitied the girl, others envied her rise in status. But those who remembered the screams, those who had seen brides disappear, watched with dread. One old woman, toothless and blind, was said to have whispered a curse as Eleanor's carriage passed. The house will drink her soul. But what exactly was the ritual? Few dared to speak of it directly. Stories conflicted, twisted by fear and time. Some said the Carvers drank the blood of their brides to bind them to the family. Others swore the brides were forced to partake in unspeakable acts beneath the mansion, rites to honor some ancient power that kept the family's wealth secure. One particularly chilling tale told of a bride who refused to take part. She screamed, fought, and tried to flee. The next morning, her body was found in the river, pale as snow, with her eyes gouged out. Officially, it was called an accident. The locals knew better. What united all the whispers was this: on the wedding night, the bride ceased to be her own. She became a Carver, body and soul, through terror. And so, in 1863, as America bled on the battlefields, another kind of blood prepared to flow in the halls of the Carver estate. Eleanor Whitfield's fate was sealed, though she did not yet know it. Her laughter, her innocence, would soon be tested in ways no woman should endure. The town spoke of it in hushed tones, avoiding the mansion's shadow as twilight fell. Candles flickered in the windows of the Carver house. Servants scurried with fearful eyes, carrying linens, preparing chambers that would never be touched by sunlight. And the oaks around the estate swayed as though they, too, whispered of the coming night. The legend of the Carver wedding ritual was about to claim another victim, but this time someone would remember. This time, the story would not remain a whisper. The Carver estate rose like a monument to forgotten sins, a sprawling manor of brick and timber that seemed to absorb the light around it. It stood on a ridge above the river, its windows reflecting only the gray of the sky, never the warmth of the sun. Even the trees that surrounded the property leaned away from it, their twisted branches bending like skeletal arms, recoiling from a corpse. Travelers passing along the dirt road would not look directly at it. Horses often grew restless near the gates, their nostrils flaring as though catching the scent of something foul carried on the wind. To those who knew it, the house was alive. Servants swore they heard footsteps in corridors where no one walked. Doors closed on their own, sometimes with such force the frames cracked. Portraits of ancestors lined the hallways, and though their paint was faded, their eyes followed every movement. At night, the house creaked not like timber shifting, but like breathing. Deep, slow, patient, as though the walls themselves were listening. The estate was older than the town of Ashford itself, built in the early 1700s by the first Carver patriarch, a man whispered to have dabbled in forbidden rites long before he crossed the Atlantic. Its foundations, locals claimed, were laid on Tuscarora burial grounds, a desecration that cursed both the land and the family. The house had grown over the decades, each generation adding wings, towers, and rooms that were never marked on any plans. Some doors led to staircases that descended into darkness, others opened into bricked walls, as if the house had secrets it would not share. On the eve of Nathaniel Carver's wedding, the mansion stirred with unusual activity. Servants hurried from room to room carrying linens and trays, their faces pale, their eyes refusing to meet one another. None of them spoke above a whisper. They had all lived through Carver weddings before. They knew the preparations were not for celebration, but for containment. In the great dining hall, chandeliers glimmered with 1,000 candles, their wax dripping like tears onto the long oak table. Platters of food, pheasant, venison, roasted hog, were prepared, but no one expected the family to eat much. The feast was always for show, a facade of normalcy for those who might gossip in town. The true focus of the night would happen upstairs, far from the laughter of the hall. The room chosen for Eleanor Whitfield, the bride-to-be, had been locked for months in anticipation. It was called the Chamber of Union, though none of the servants dared utter the name aloud. Heavy curtains covered its windows, blocking out even the moonlight. The bed was dressed in deep, crimson silk, the same bedding that had been used for every Carver bride. On the mantel stood a basin carved from black stone, cold to the touch, its surface etched with symbols no one understood. No priest had ever blessed this room. No laughter had ever lingered here. It was a place where innocence entered and something else, something altered, emerged. Nathaniel Carver walked the halls that afternoon with measured steps. Tall, lean, his hair dark as ink, he carried himself like a man accustomed to obedience. Yet there was a heaviness in his eyes, a shadow that betrayed the burden he bore. Servants bowed as he passed, but none smiled. Even in his youth, Nathaniel had been spoken of in tones of unease. He was polite, yes, educated, even handsome by certain measures, but there was a hollowness to him, a stillness that unsettled. From the parlor, faint strains of a piano drifted upward, though no musician could be found. Some said the house itself played on the nights before a wedding, as if rehearsing for the ceremony that was never written in any church book. By dusk, carriages rattled up the long drive, their wheels crunching over gravel. Guests arrived dressed in black and gray, their faces solemn, their voices hushed. They were not the joyous attendees of a union, but witnesses, participants in something they too could never fully escape. Some were family, others allies tied to the Carvers by debt, land, or secrets of their own. None came willingly. All came because they had to. Inside, Eleanor Whitfield was led by 2 maidservants to her chamber. Her white gown shimmered in the candlelight, the veil falling like a shroud over her trembling face. Her hands were cold, her lips pale. She had heard the whispers, of course. Every girl in Ashford had. But her parents' faces, drawn and desperate, haunted her more than the rumors. They had insisted this was her duty, her salvation, the only way to preserve the family name. Love had no place here. Choice had no place here. As the doors closed behind her, Eleanor felt the air of the Carver estate wrap around her like chains. The walls seemed to hum with secrets, the portraits watching her with eyes too lifelike to be paint. Somewhere in the depths of the house, a door slammed with finality. The night had begun, and the house itself seemed to exhale, as though eager for what was to come. The carriage wheels groaned as they ground to a halt in front of the Carver estate, the horses restless, their hooves striking sparks against the gravel drive. Eleanor Whitfield stepped out into the fading light, her gown brushing the ground like a trail of innocence already marked for sacrifice. The sky above was bruised with storm clouds, the kind that carried no rain, only an oppressive weight that seemed to press down upon the earth. She glanced upward at the mansion that loomed before her, its windows dark as hollow eyes, its gables like jagged teeth against the twilight. For a moment she thought she saw movement in one of the upper rooms, a silhouette watching, but when she blinked, the window was empty again. A shiver crawled up her spine. The air smelled of damp earth and burning oil, the faint tang of smoke from torches set along the entry path. Guests were already arriving, stepping down from polished carriages, their faces veiled in solemnity. They did not laugh, did not smile. Their voices were low, as though entering a chapel for the dead, rather than a home for the living. Eleanor clutched the folds of her dress and followed her parents, who avoided her eyes. Her father's shoulders sagged with defeat. Her mother's lips were pressed into a thin line, a silent apology she could not speak aloud. Inside, the mansion swallowed. The foyer's ceilings arched high overhead, carved beams casting long shadows in the flickering candlelight. Portraits of Carver ancestors lined the walls, each face sharp, angular, almost predatory in its stillness. Their painted eyes seemed to follow her every step. A chill clung to the air despite the roaring hearth at the end of the hall. The scent of wax and smoke mingled with something metallic, faint but undeniable, as though the walls themselves bled memory. Servants bowed as Eleanor passed, their expressions tight, their eyes darting quickly away. She caught fragments of whispers, half-sentences, hurried prayers, before they slipped back into silence. None offered her comfort. None dared. Nathaniel Carver appeared at the base of the grand staircase. His tall frame was draped in a black suit that seemed almost funereal, his hands gloved though the evening was not cold. He smiled faintly, the corners of his lips curving without warmth, his eyes, grey, depthless, locked onto Eleanor's as though claiming her with a gaze alone. "Eleanor," he said, his voice smooth, measured but hollow. "Welcome home." The words chilled her more than the air, for he spoke not as a groom, greeting a bride, but as a warden welcoming a prisoner. The ceremony itself was brief, performed in the candle-lit parlor before only a handful of witnesses. The vows were spoken, the rings exchanged, yet no priest presided. An older Carver uncle, whose hands trembled with age, but whose eyes gleamed with something darker, conducted the ritual. He muttered phrases that did not belong to scripture, words Eleanor did not understand, but felt deep in her bones, like cold fingers clutching her heart. The guests bowed their heads, silent, complicit. When it was done, the applause was a hollow murmur. No one cheered, no one embraced. Eleanor's mother wept quietly, turning her face to hide her tears. Nathaniel only offered his arm and led Eleanor toward the staircase, her veil trailing behind her like a funeral pall. As they climbed, Eleanor glanced back. The guests watched her ascend with expressions she could not read: pity, fear, hunger. The doors to the parlor closed, sealing them away. Upstairs, the corridors stretched long and dark, lined with locked doors. The air grew colder with every step, the silence pressing against her ears until she could hear nothing but the thud of her own heart. Nathaniel's grip was firm on her arm, guiding her toward the chamber prepared for their night. At the end of the hall, a heavy oak door waited, its iron handle shaped like a serpent swallowing its tail. Nathaniel paused, his face unreadable. For the briefest moment, his eyes flickered with something that might have been sorrow or dread. Then it was gone, replaced by the same emptiness as before. "This is tradition," he whispered, his voice, low, meant only for her. "It is the way of my family. You must not resist." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Her mind screamed to turn, to flee, to throw herself down the staircase and into the night. But her legs refused. Nathaniel opened the door, and the chamber exhaled its stale breath into the hallway. The darkness inside seemed thicker than the shadows of the hall, as though the room itself had been waiting for her arrival. He led her in, the door closing behind them with a sound like a coffin sealing shut. The chamber smelled of wax and iron. Curtains smothered the windows, smudging out the last traces of daylight. Candles flickered in tall stands, their flames trembling as though disturbed by an unseen breath. The crimson silk bed dominated the room, its surface smooth, untouched, waiting. On the mantel, the black stone basin glistened faintly, as though something within it absorbed the light rather than reflected it. Eleanor's chest tightened. She turned to Nathaniel, desperate for reassurance, for humanity. But his face was pale, drawn, as though he too were a prisoner in this ritual. "Tonight," he said softly, "you become a Carver, not by choice, not by love, by blood." And with those words, Eleanor realized her fate had already been sealed long before she stepped foot into the estate. The door shut behind Eleanor with a sound that seemed far too heavy for a single piece of wood. The echo lingered in the chamber, vibrating against the walls as if the house itself acknowledged her presence. The chamber smelled of extinguished candles and something older, musk, iron, the faint sharpness of dried blood hidden beneath layers of incense. The curtains were drawn tight, suffocating the windows, leaving the candle flames to flicker weakly against the gloom. Every surface was draped in deep colors, burgundy, black, shades that seemed to drink the light rather than reflect it. The bed, looming against the far wall, was made not for comfort, but for spectacle. Crimson silk sheets shimmered in the glow, heavy with an unspoken history of brides who had lain there before. Eleanor's steps faltered as Nathaniel guided her inside. She could hear the faintest sound, not from the corridor outside, but from the walls themselves, a murmur, a low hum, as if countless voices were whispering from behind the plaster. Her throat tightened. She dared not ask if Nathaniel heard it too. He closed the door with deliberate care, turning the iron key and slipping it into his pocket. There would be no escape. "Why? Why is it locked?" Eleanor's voice was barely audible. Nathaniel did not look at her. Instead, he crossed to the mantel where the black stone basin rested. He lit 2 additional candles on either side, their flames catching in his eyes and making them gleam with a strange, lifeless silver. "It is locked," he said quietly, "because what happens in this room must never touch the outside world. To be a Carver bride is to bear witness, to endure, to be remade." His words chilled her. They carried the weight of something rehearsed, something taught to him from childhood, as though he were repeating a script passed down through generations. Eleanor's eyes darted across the room. Symbols were etched faintly into the wooden floorboards, circles within circles, patterns she had never seen in any church. They seemed worn by time, as though brides' feet had scuffed them over the decades, but the outlines still pulsed faintly. In the candlelight, Nathaniel motioned to the basin. "It begins here." Eleanor's hands trembled. "What is in it?" He hesitated, then lifted a small silver flask from the mantel. Uncorking it, he poured a thick, dark liquid into the basin. The scent filled the room instantly, coppery, metallic, unmistakable. Eleanor gagged, her stomach twisting. "Blood," she whispered. Nathaniel's eyes finally met hers. There was no cruelty in his gaze, but no mercy either. "Yes, the blood of those before you, my mother's, her mother's. Every Carver bride has poured into this vessel tonight. You will join them." Eleanor stumbled back a step, her heart pounding against her ribs. The whispers in the walls grew louder as though the chamber itself responded to her fear. She shook her head violently. "No, this is madness. I won't." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. For the first time, a shadow of humanity crossed his face, fear, perhaps even pity. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think I want this?" he whispered. "Do you believe I chose this fate? Every son, every daughter, every bride and groom is bound to the same tradition. My father stood where I stand now. His father, before him, there is no choice, Eleanor, only continuation." Her breath came in ragged gasps. The room seemed to close in around her, the air growing thicker, heavy with the metallic stench of blood and the suffocating heat of the candles. "What, if I refuse?" she asked, her voice trembling. Nathaniel's eyes darkened. For a moment he said nothing, then finally whispered, "Then you will not see morning." A knock echoed against the chamber door, 3 slow, deliberate raps. Nathaniel stiffened. Eleanor froze, her heart leaping to her throat. From the other side came the voice of an elder Carver, gravelly and stern. "Is the bride prepared?" Nathaniel did not answer immediately, his hand clenched around the key in his pocket. Eleanor thought, just for a moment, that he might defy them, that he might throw open the door and lead her away. But then his shoulders slumped, the weight of his lineage pressing him back into obedience. "She is ready," he called back, though his voice cracked. The footsteps retreated, silence returned. Eleanor's knees nearly buckled. She clutched the post of the bed, her fingers digging into the carved wood. Her body screamed to run, to fight, to throw herself at the locked door. But she knew deep down that Nathaniel had spoken the truth. If she resisted, she would not live to tell of it. Nathaniel stepped closer, his voice breaking into something raw, almost desperate. "Do not hate me for what I am about to do. Hate the blood that binds us both. Hate the family that built this prison. But survive it, Eleanor. Survive tonight, and you will live." His words, meant as comfort, sounded more like a sentence. The basin glimmered darkly in the candlelight. The bed waited, its crimson silk smooth and untouchable. And beyond the locked door, shadows gathered. The Carver Ritual was about to begin. The first chime of midnight rang through the Carver estate, the grandfather clock's deep toll reverberating down the halls like a funeral bell. Eleanor flinched at the sound. The chamber door rattled as the echo carried, and she thought she heard answering footsteps, many footsteps, approaching from every direction of the house. Nathaniel extinguished the last of his hesitation in silence. He moved with mechanical precision, as though some hidden string pulled him. He adjusted the candles, aligning them so their flames circled the basin in symmetry. Eleanor stood frozen by the bed, her fists clenched around the folds of her gown, her breath shallow. From the corridor came the scrape of wood against stone, then voices. Low, guttural chants seeped beneath the door, syllables that belonged to no prayer she had ever heard in church. The language sounded ancient, its rhythm like the turning of a wheel, inevitable and unrelenting. The lock turned with a slow grind. The door opened inward, and shadows poured in. Figures cloaked in black entered one by one, their faces hidden beneath hoods stitched with faint silvery thread. The candles bent toward them as though pulled by an unseen current, their flames guttering in nervous arcs. There were 8 of them, maybe 10. It was hard to count as they moved in a circle around the chamber, their robes brushing the floor, their chants growing louder. Eleanor's pulse pounded. She tried to meet their eyes, but there were none, only void beneath the hoods. Her knees weakened, and for the first time she wondered if she might faint. The eldest stepped forward, taller than the rest, his robe embroidered with crimson patterns that marked him as something more than kin. His voice was dry as paper. The bride has entered the chamber of union. The covenant awaits. Nathaniel bowed his head. Eleanor did not. Her body trembled, but her defiance sparked in her chest. The elder's hidden gaze turned toward her, and she felt it, like cold iron pressed to her skin. The bride will kneel. The words, though spoken calmly, carried weight that pressed against her shoulders. Eleanor shook her head. No. No. I will not. The circle of cloaked figures tightened. Their chanting wove tighter, pressing against her mind like invisible hands. Nathaniel stepped forward, placing a hand on her arm, his voice low and urgent. Do it, Eleanor. If you resist, they'll... He stopped himself, his jaw clenching. She pulled away, tears stinging her eyes. What are they? What is this? The elder raised a hand, and the chanting ceased. The silence that followed was worse, thick, and smothering. He moved toward the basin, dipping a finger into the dark liquid. When he lifted it, Eleanor saw the gleam, thick, red, alive. He drew a mark in the air, and though his finger did not touch her, she felt the burn on her forehead, as though fire had branded her skin. She gasped, stumbling back, her body convulsing with sudden heat. The covenant is older than the Republic, the elder intoned, older than the colony, older than the soil upon which this house stands. Every bride gives, every bride binds. You will kneel, or you will be taken. Behind him, the other cloaked figures swayed as one, whispering words that coiled through the chamber like smoke. Eleanor's vision swam. The basin seemed to pulse, its surface rippling though no hand disturbed it. The symbols on the floor glowed faintly, like embers beneath ash. Nathaniel gripped her hand suddenly. His touch startled her, warm, human. His voice, too, was human, a tremor of desperation breaking through the practiced calm. Please, he whispered, so soft only she could hear. Kneel. Survive this. I can help you later, but not if you fight them now. Eleanor's body shook. Her instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The door was blocked by shadows. The walls pulsed with whispers, and the elder's voice pressed down upon her like a command from something not human. Her knees buckled. Slowly, unwillingly, she sank to the floor. A hiss of satisfaction passed through the circle. The elder gestured, and 2 of the robed figures stepped forward, each carrying a slender silver blade. The edges glimmered, catching candlelight like threads of lightning. They positioned themselves on either side of Eleanor, the blades angled downward, waiting. The elder dipped both hands into the basin, lifting them dripping with crimson. His voice rose, the chant becoming almost musical, a rhythm that matched the pounding of Eleanor's heart. The others joined in, their voices layering, rising, vibrating against the walls. The chamber shook with it. Eleanor's vision blurred. She saw the faces in the portraits around the room shimmer, the painted, eyes glowing faintly. The whispers she had heard earlier grew louder, becoming words, pleas, cries, echoes of brides before her. Her breath came in ragged gasps. The elder approached. The blood in his hands dripped, each drop striking the wooden floor with a hiss, as though the wood itself recoiled. He extended his hands above Eleanor's bowed head, the crimson liquid about to fall. Nathaniel closed his eyes. The Carver Ritual had begun. The moment the elder's bloodied hands hovered above her head, Eleanor felt as if every nerve in her body had been strung like wire. The droplets trembled at the tips of his fingers, refusing to fall immediately, as though savoring the anticipation. Around her, the cloaked circle swayed in unison, their chants rising, then falling, like the sound of a tide pulling back from a shore it had claimed 1,000 times before. Her mind screamed to resist, but her body felt pinned by an invisible weight. The mark seared onto her forehead still pulsed, a fiery reminder that this was no mere family tradition. This was something ancient, rooted in powers she could not understand. The first drop fell. It struck her scalp with a heat that wasn't heat at all. It was cold, unbearably cold, crawling across her skin like ice buried deep within her skull. The second drop followed, then the third, until the elder's hands had emptied themselves upon her. With each drip, her vision blurred and the chamber warped, the walls elongated, then twisted inward. The portraits shifted again, their painted mouths opening in silent screams. Eleanor gasped, clutching at Nathaniel's hand, but he no longer looked at her. His eyes were shut tight, lips moving with the same rhythm as the cloaked figures, though quieter, as though he prayed not to them, but against them. Blood of the past binds the present, the elder intoned, his voice rising above the chant. The bride is marked, the bride is bound. The others echoed, the bride is bound. Eleanor shook her head violently, tears streaking her cheeks. No, I'm not bound. I don't belong to this. I never will. But the words fell dead in the air. The elder's hidden gaze turned on her. It is not belief that binds you, child. It is blood, yours and ours. At his gesture, one of the robed figures stepped forward, presenting a vessel, a silver chalice etched with symbols that shifted when she tried to focus on them. Within it, something dark sloshed, thicker than wine, darker than ink. The elder dipped his fingers once more, drawing a line from Eleanor's brow down to her chin. She tried to recoil, but Nathaniel's grip tightened, holding her steady. You will drink, the elder commanded. Her stomach lurched. She tried to twist away, but two other figures seized her arms, forcing her upright. The chalice hovered near her lips, the smell of copper and rot filling her nostrils. Her gag reflex rose, but the circle's chant quickened, drowning her resistance. In rhythm, Nathaniel finally opened his eyes. For the briefest second he looked at her, not as a conspirator, but as a man torn between love and chains. His lips trembled. Eleanor, just a sip, survive, please. The elder pressed the chalice, harder against her lips. The liquid touched her mouth, bitter and metallic. Against her will, some slid down her throat. Her body convulsed, her stomach twisting, but she could not spit it out. The hands holding her forced her head back until she swallowed. The chamber roared. The portraits on the walls seemed to laugh and wail at once. The floor vibrated beneath her knees. Eleanor's body grew hot, then unbearably cold. Visions cascaded before her eyes. Women dressed in gowns of centuries past, kneeling just as she was, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. She saw them scream. She saw them vanish. No, she whimpered, her voice cracking. What is this? What have you done to me? The elder raised the chalice high. She is bound to the covenant. She is bride and vessel. She is one of us. The cloaked circle thundered their response, one of us. But Eleanor's mind clawed through the haze of terror, clinging to the last fragment of her will. She pushed against the hands restraining her, her voice breaking free in a desperate cry. I am not yours. I belong to no covenant, no shadow, no curse. Her words struck like sparks in the chamber. For a moment, the chant faltered. The candles flickered violently, nearly extinguishing. The basin's surface rippled outward, black waves cresting at the edges. The elder froze. His hand, still raised. Slowly, he lowered the chalice, turning his hidden face toward Eleanor. Though she could not see his eyes, she felt them burrow into her soul. "Defiance," he whispered, and the word carried weight enough to make the others recoil. It has been long since a bride resisted so. The circle stirred, whispering to each other, their voices a hiss of discontent. Nathaniel's grip trembled on her hand. His eyes darted toward the door as if for the first time he imagined an escape. The elder stepped closer. "Do you believe you are stronger than those who came before you, than the blood that courses through these walls, than the power that shaped this land before your kind even walked it?" Eleanor raised her chin, though her tears betrayed her fear. "I believe I am stronger than your curse." The elder's silence stretched, filling the chamber like smoke. Then he lifted the chalice again and hurled its contents into the basin. The dark liquid hissed on impact, steam rising like the breath of something buried deep below. The floor quaked, and the glowing symbols blazed bright crimson. The chant resumed louder, harsher. The figures swayed violently, their movements erratic, as if seized by forces beyond their control. Nathaniel pulled Eleanor close, whispering frantically into her ear. "You've broken the rhythm. You've angered it. Eleanor, listen to me. If you fight, it will consume you." But she was beyond listening. Her body vibrated with strange energy, her heart pounding not just with fear but with defiance. She felt as though something inside her had awakened, something that did not cower before shadows. The elder raised his arms. The air thickened, pressing down like water. "Then let the covenant decide her fate." The basin erupted. A column of black flame shot upward, spiraling toward the ceiling without smoke, without heat. The portraits screamed aloud, their voices shrill and overlapping. The walls shuddered as though the house itself were alive and writhing. From within the flame, a shape emerged, tall, indistinct, writhing like a mass of smoke and bone. Its presence crushed the air from Eleanor's lungs. She fell to her knees, choking, her hands clutching at her throat. Nathaniel dropped beside her, shielding her with his body, though it meant nothing before such a force. His eyes shone with terror, but also with something else. "Resolve. Hold on," he whispered. "Don't give in." The figure within the flame leaned forward. No face, only the impression of one, hollow eyes, a gaping maw that seemed to pull the light itself into its depths. When it spoke, it was not with sound, but with a vibration that shook Eleanor's bones. "She resists." The elder bowed deeply. "Yes, master. She resists. Then she is worthy." The chamber erupted into chaos. The cloaked figures fell to their knees, some wailing in ecstasy, others convulsing as though struck by lightning. The elder remained bowed, his crimson-stitched robe glowing faintly. Nathaniel gripped Eleanor tighter, his voice trembling. "Worthy? What does it mean? Eleanor, what have you done?" The flame shifted, its darkness wrapping outward like tendrils. One brushed against Eleanor's face, searing her skin with cold so deep it burned. She screamed, collapsing forward onto the floor. Her vision spiraled, and the last thing she saw was the basin overflowing, the dark liquid spilling onto the glowing symbols, merging with the floor until the chamber itself seemed to drink. Darkness consumed her. When Eleanor's eyes fluttered open, the world was no longer the same. The chamber had grown quiet, but not with peace. Silence here was heavy, smothering, as though it were alive and watching. The candles had burned lower, their flames trembling in the stillness. The portraits, those warped paintings that had shifted before, now stared openly, their eyes gleaming as if lit from within. Eleanor lay on the cold floor, her cheek pressed against the stone that still pulsed faintly with the dying glow of the symbols. Her body ached, her lips tinged with the metallic aftertaste of blood. She pushed herself upright, every muscle trembling. The memory of the black flame and the voice that had spoken still rang in her bones. Nathaniel knelt beside her, his face pale and drawn. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You shouldn't have spoken," he whispered, his voice cracking. You've changed everything." The elder stepped forward from the circle, his crimson stitching burning faintly in the dim light. His voice was calm, yet it carried a weight that pressed on Eleanor's chest. "The covenant has spoken. The master has chosen." Eleanor's breath caught. "Chosen what?" The elder's hidden gaze did not waver. "You are not merely bound. You are marked for ascension." The words fell like lead in the chamber. The cloaked figures shifted, some bowing lower in reverence, others trembling as though in fear. Nathaniel's grip on her arm tightened until it hurt. He turned on the elder, his voice rising for the first time. "No, this isn't how it was meant to be. She was supposed to join, nothing more. This isn't what we agreed." The elder tilted his head slowly, as though studying Nathaniel with quiet contempt. "You think the covenant bargains with you, boy? You think your love grants you power to dictate the will of the master?" Nathaniel's lips trembled, but he held his ground. "She's mine. She's my wife." The elder's reply was soft, but the echo in his tone made it thunder in the chamber. "She belongs to the flame now." Eleanor's chest tightened, her breath short and sharp. She staggered to her feet, glaring at the cloaked figures. "No, I belong to no one, not to you, not to your master, not to this curse you've buried yourselves in." Her voice shook, but the force in her words made several of the figures recoil. The elder raised a hand, and the whispers of the circle hushed. He stepped closer, lowering his hood just enough for Eleanor to see what lay beneath. His face was lined with age, but not the way of men. It was stretched thin, as though the years had pulled at his flesh without tearing it. His eyes were black, not merely dark, but voids, swallowing the light around them. When he spoke again, his breath smelled of earth long buried. "Child, you mistake this for choice. It is not choice. It is legacy." He lifted his hand, and Eleanor's body froze as though unseen chains bound her. Her heart raced, but her limbs would not obey her. She could only watch as he traced a symbol in the air. The glow of the floor flared once more, and the basin trembled, its black waters rippling though untouched. The silence shattered. From the liquid rose whispers, not one but many, a chorus of voices layered atop one another, men and women old and young, screaming and praying, pleading and chanting. The sound filled the chamber, pressing against Eleanor's skull until she thought her head would split. The elder's voice cut through the cacophony. "Hear them, the brides of centuries past. Their blood sealed the covenant. Their voices feed the master. They are bound, as you shall be bound." Eleanor's throat burned. The visions from before came back. Those pale faces of long-dead brides, their mouths open in silent horror. Now she could hear them. They screamed in her ears, begging for release. "No," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You've trapped them. You've damned them." The elder's eyes gleamed, empty and endless. "They serve. As you will." Nathaniel lunged forward then, shoving himself between Eleanor and the elder. His hands shook, but his voice held a desperate strength. "Enough. If you want her, you'll have to kill me first." The chamber erupted in gasps and murmurs. The cloaked figures recoiled, their chant breaking. Eleanor's heart twisted. Nathaniel, torn between love and duty, had finally chosen. But the elder only smiled. His thin lips curled, revealing teeth, too sharp, too many. "Do you think the covenant fears the sacrifice of one boy? He lifted his hand again, and Nathaniel froze as Eleanor had before, his body rigid, his face locked in horror. Eleanor screamed, fighting the invisible weight that held her, but she could only watch as the elder reached into the basin and pulled forth a shape. A dagger, black as obsidian, dripping with liquid that hissed as it struck the stone floor. "This is the blade of binding," the elder intoned. "Forged in blood, quenched in the master's flame. With it, your bond will be sealed." He pressed the dagger into Nathaniel's rigid hands, forcing his grip to close around it. Nathaniel's eyes bulged, his face straining against the unseen force. He tried to shake his head, tried to cry out, but only a strangled gasp escaped. "Strike her," the elder commanded. Eleanor's heart stopped. She struggled against the invisible chains, screaming Nathaniel's name. "No, don't listen to him. Fight it, Nathaniel." His body shook, his arm trembling as though pulled by strings. The blade wavered, inching toward her chest. Tears spilled from his eyes. His jaw clenched against the force compelling him. Eleanor's mind raced. The whispers of the bound brides filled her ears, their cries echoing in her skull. For the first time she felt not only their suffering but their strength. Centuries of women who had resisted, who had screamed, who had died rather than submit. Their voices merged with hers, swelling into a chorus that pushed against the weight pressing her down. She screamed, not in fear, but in fury. "I will not be yours. I will not be bound." The chamber shuddered violently. The candles burst, showering sparks. The portraits split down the middle, their painted faces tearing with screams. The basin cracked, its black waters spilling across the floor. The force binding her shattered. Eleanor surged forward, seizing Nathaniel's arm, just as the dagger neared her chest. She wrenched it aside, the blade striking stone with a sound like breaking bone. Sparks flew, and a crack tore across the chamber floor. The elder reeled back, his black eyes narrowing. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed his face. Not anger, not contempt, but fear. The whispers rose higher, filling the chamber. With a deafening roar, Eleanor gripped Nathaniel tightly, pulling the blade from his hand. Its weight burned her palm, but she held it high, her voice breaking above the chaos. "You've fed on their pain for centuries, but I will end this. I will free them." The chamber exploded in sound. The floor split wider, the black flame surging upward once more, taller, darker, hungrier. The cloaked figures screamed, some fleeing, others falling to their knees in worship, and from within the flame, the voice returned. "She resists. She endures. She may destroy." The elder fell. To his knees, his skeletal hands raised in supplication. "Master, do not forsake us." But the flame only leaned closer, its hollow eyes fixed on Eleanor. The sound of the bride's voices filled her chest, and for the first time she did not feel alone. She felt their strength pouring into her, centuries of defiance burning in her veins. Eleanor tightened her grip on the dagger, meeting the void's gaze without flinching. "I am not your bride," she whispered. "I am your end." The chamber shook as though the earth itself had heard her. The black flame screamed, a sound so piercing it split the stone walls. The floor collapsed beneath them, and the world dissolved into darkness. The fall was endless. Eleanor's scream was torn from her throat as the stone floor gave way beneath her. She clutched the black dagger to her chest, her other hand tangled with Nathaniel's. The world blurred into a spiral of shadow and fire, portraits and faces screaming as they shattered into the void. Cloaked figures plummeted alongside her, their robes twisting in the air, their cries swallowed by the cavernous darkness. It was not merely a collapse of stone, it was a descent into something deeper. The air grew thick, suffocating, filled with the smell of burning flesh and damp earth. The screams of the bound brides thundered around her, now rising to a fever pitch, half agony, half hope. Eleanor's vision fractured, her eyes assaulted by flashes, brides torn from their graves, fire licking at bone, pale faces rising like specters, reaching toward her with hands both pleading and accusing. She struck the ground with a violent jolt, though there was no stone, no earth, only a black surface that rippled like liquid beneath her. Nathaniel landed beside her with a groan, his hand slipping from hers as he rolled across the shifting ground. The impact should have broken bones, but the place absorbed them, swallowing the force. The dagger still burned in Eleanor's grip. She forced herself to her knees, gasping, her body shaking with exhaustion and fury. Around her the carvers staggered, to their feet, their hoods torn back to reveal faces contorted, melting, eyes hollowing into sockets that bled shadows. The collapse had stripped them of human pretense. Now they were little more than vessels, shells bound by their own covenant. Nathaniel crawled to her side, his chest heaving. His once handsome features were pale, as though drained of life, but his eyes clung desperately to hers. "Eleanor, run. You can still escape." She shook her head, clutching his arm. "Not without you." A scream tore across the black expanse, louder than any mortal voice. The elder rose from the abyss, his robe shredded, his skeletal frame exposed. But his void-like eyes still glowed with unnatural light, and his lips twisted into a grin that made Eleanor's stomach churn. "You thought to end it, child," he rasped, his voice now carrying the echo of countless throats. "But you have only pulled us deeper, into the Master's true domain." The ground beneath Eleanor's knees trembled, rippling outward. From the liquid surface rose forms, faces, hundreds of them, the brides of generations, their mouths open in eternal screams. Their hair floated around them as though underwater, their eyes blind yet fixed on her. Eleanor's throat tightened. She could feel their agony pressing against her mind, their cries for freedom clawing at her chest. She lifted the dagger, its blade pulsing with heat, and the faces recoiled as though recognizing it. The elder raised his arms, his bones creaking. "You carry the blade of binding. Do you not yet understand? With it, you do not destroy. You inherit." The faces surged upward, their mouths chanting in a unified wail, "Join us! Join us! Join us!" Eleanor staggered back, clutching Nathaniel. "No, I won't be like them." The elder's grin widened, his skeletal jaw stretching unnaturally. "You already are. The Master has chosen, and choice is final. You are the vessel. You are the bride. Through you the covenant will endure." The liquid ground bubbled violently. Shapes rose, figures half-formed, brides merging into each other, their bodies fused with the black substance, arms writhing like snakes, torsos bending backward with bone-snapping cracks. They reached for Eleanor, whispering her name now. Nathaniel grabbed her shoulders, his voice breaking. "Fight it. Whatever happens, don't let them take you." But even as he spoke, his body convulsed. He collapsed against her, his face twisting in pain. Black veins spread across his skin like cracks in porcelain, his eyes clouding over with a dark film. Eleanor clutched him desperately, tears streaming down her cheeks. "No, not you too. Don't leave me." He coughed, his breath rattling. They're inside me. The covenant never let me go. I brought you into this, and now..." He gasped, seizing her wrist, forcing her to look into his failing eyes. "End it, Eleanor. End all of us." The dagger pulsed violently, almost leaping in her grip. It wanted release. It wanted blood. The elder laughed, the sound echoing across the abyss. "Strike, child, but no. Every cut binds deeper. Every drop feeds him." The brides screamed louder, their faces surging closer. The chamber of shadows trembled as though collapsing inward, dragging everything toward a center point where the flame began to rise once more, massive and endless, its eyes like twin voids staring straight into Eleanor's soul. The voice thundered again, no longer whispers but a roar that split the air: bride, serve, or consume. The choice struck Eleanor like lightning. Serve, and she would become what the brides had become, a vessel, her soul bound forever to feed the flame. Consume, and she would wield the dagger not to end the covenant, but to devour it, to become something worse, something eternal. Her body shook, her hands trembling around the dagger. Nathaniel writhed in her arms, his veins spreading further, his voice faint. Eleanor, please, don't let it win. Don't let me become like them. The abyss surged upward, waves of black water crashing around her. The brides screamed, some begging, some commanding, their voices indistinguishable. The elder raised his skeletal arms, his own body unraveling into smoke and bone, his voice reverent as he shouted, "Yes, child. Choose. Bind yourself or embrace him." Eleanor's chest heaved, her heart hammering. She stared into the dagger, into its black flame frozen within the obsidian blade. For a moment, she saw her reflection, her eyes sunken, her face pale, her lips bloodied. But behind her reflection were the faces of every bride, all staring, waiting. Her scream tore through the abyss. She drove the dagger into the ground. The impact shook the world. The black surface split apart. Light, blinding, searing white light, exploding. Upward, consuming shadow, consuming flame, consuming the elder's scream as he was torn into ash. The brides shrieked, their forms shattering into dust, their cries shifting from agony to relief. For one eternal second, Eleanor felt their chains break, their souls spiraling upward, vanishing into the light. The abyss collapsed inward, folding upon itself. Nathaniel convulsed violently in her arms, the black veins burning away in the light. His eyes cleared, his breath returning in ragged gasps. But the world was ending. The floor disintegrated, the flame shrieking as it was devoured, the elder's bones scattering into nothing. Eleanor clutched Nathaniel, holding him tight as the white light consumed everything. Then, silence. When Eleanor opened her eyes again, she was lying on cold earth. The smell of damp stone filled her lungs. Above her stretched a ruined ceiling, the remains of the Carver estate collapsing inward. The ritual chamber was gone. No flame, no brides, no elder, only rubble and ash. Nathaniel lay beside her, unconscious but breathing. She touched his face, her hands trembling. Relief washed through her, but dread lingered, coiling in her gut. Because though the chamber was destroyed, though the covenant had been shattered, the dagger still lay beside her. Its blade was cracked, the black flame within flickering faintly, and faintly, in the back of her mind she heard them, not screams, not cries, but whispers. Brides who were free. And something else. A voice deeper, patient, waiting. The covenant was broken. But the master was not gone. The rain had stopped by the time Eleanor staggered into the open night. The once mighty Carver estate smoldered behind her, its great stone walls cracked and sagging like the bones of a dying beast. Fire still burned in the ruins, embers licking the skeletal frame of what had been a monument to power and legacy. She stumbled across the broken threshold, Nathaniel leaning heavily on her shoulder, his breaths shallow but steady. The air outside was cold, sharp against her sweat-slicked skin. She tilted her head back, gulping it down like a drowning woman tasting oxygen for the first time. The sky stretched black and endless above, the moon swollen and pale, its light illuminating the wreckage below. The world should have felt free. It didn't. The silence pressed against her ears, unnatural after the chaos she had endured. Not a cricket stirred. Not a bird took wing. The countryside lay still as a graveyard. She lowered Nathaniel onto a patch of wet grass, brushing damp hair from his forehead. His skin was clammy, though the black veins had receded. He stirred faintly, whispering her name like a man caught between dream and waking. "I'm here," she said, clutching his hand tightly. "We're free now. It's over." But even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were a lie. The dagger lay nearby, half buried in the mud, its fractured blade glinting in the moonlight. She had tried to leave it behind, to cast it into the abyss as the chamber fell, but it had followed her, clinging to her hand until she collapsed outside. Now it sat like a vulture, waiting. Eleanor tore her gaze from it and pressed her forehead to Nathaniel's chest, listening to his heart. The steady rhythm grounded her, but beneath it she swore she heard another sound, like faint whispers echoing just beyond the edge of her hearing. She clenched her teeth. Not here. Not now. Hours passed in a haze. She dragged Nathaniel as far from the ruins as her weary body would allow, to the edge of the Carver grounds where the forest began. The trees loomed like dark sentinels, their branches clawing at the night sky. She made a bed of leaves and propped Nathaniel against a fallen log, covering him with her torn cloak. For the first time since the nightmare began, exhaustion claimed her. She closed her eyes, though sleep did not come easily. When it did, it was restless, filled with images of screaming brides and hollow eyes. She woke to the sound of footsteps. Her heart seized as she jerked upright, clutching for the dagger. It lay at her side, gleaming faintly. She wrapped her fingers around it and rose unsteadily, her body sore and trembling. The figure emerged from the tree line slowly, his lantern casting long shadows across the grass. He was an older man, stooped and weary, his clothes ragged with years of labor. His eyes widened when they fell upon her. "Good Lord," he whispered, his voice cracked. "You're alive." Eleanor blinked, disoriented. "Who are you?" "Name's Harlan," the man said, stopping a cautious distance away. "I live in the village. We saw the fire from miles out. Knew it could only be the Carver's place. No one dares come near here, not at night, but I had to see. Thought maybe." His gaze flicked to Nathaniel's pale form, then back to her. Thought maybe it had finally ended. His words carried weight, a burden of generations. Eleanor tightened her grip on the dagger. "What do you know of them?" Harlan stepped closer, lowering his lantern. "Enough to fear them. Enough to teach my children never to wander these woods, never to look at that cursed house. But none of us ever dared speak too much. We all knew, we felt what they were." He looked toward the smoldering ruins. "And now it's fallen. Was it you who brought it down?" Eleanor's throat tightened. She wanted to say, yes, to claim victory. But the whispers stirred again, curling through her skull like smoke. "We are not gone." She pressed her lips together, nodding once. "It's over." Harlan studied her, his eyes sharp with doubt, as though he sensed the lie beneath her words. But he did not press. Instead, he extended a hand. "Come to the village, both of you. We'll tend to your wounds." Eleanor hesitated, glancing at Nathaniel. He was still unconscious, his breaths shallow but steady. She couldn't carry him much farther on her own. The villagers could help. And yet, her gaze flicked to the dagger. Could she walk into a village with it? With the whispers gnawing at her? As if sensing her thoughts, Harlan frowned at the blade. "That thing, it's one of theirs, isn't it?" Eleanor gripped it tighter, her voice low. "It's the reason I'm alive." He shook his head slowly. "Then be rid of it. Cast it into the river, bury it deep, break it if you can. Nothing of the Carver should remain." She wanted to. Oh, how she wanted to, but her hand refused to obey. The whispers coiled tighter, wrapping around her mind. We are bound. You cannot cast us away, bride eternal, keeper of the flame. Her hand trembled. I'll do what I must. Harlan said nothing more. He helped her lift Nathaniel, and together they began the long walk toward the village. The dawn was breaking, pale light spilling across the horizon, turning the ruins behind them into a silhouette of jagged stone and smoke. For a moment, Eleanor dared to believe they were leaving it behind, but as she walked, her grip on the dagger never loosened. The whispers never ceased, and though the village lights flickered ahead, promising shelter and safety, she knew the Carver curse had only changed its form. It was no longer bound to a house. It was bound to her. The village of Hollow's End stirred uneasily at dawn. Smoke curled from chimneys, but the usual sounds of mourning, roosters, market chatter, the laughter of children, were muted. Word of the Carver estate's collapse had already spread, carried by the orange glow that had lit the horizon hours earlier. When Eleanor and Nathaniel arrived, guided by Harlan's lantern, doors cracked open only a fraction to watch them pass. Whispers slipped through the cracks like shadows. Is that her? Did they escape? Or is she one of them? Eleanor kept her eyes forward, Nathaniel supported against her side. His strength had returned in small waves, but his body remained weak, pale. Every few steps he coughed, and she feared the dark tendrils might return to claim him. Harlan led them to a low timber cottage at the village edge. Rest here. My wife will tend his wounds. He shot Eleanor a cautious glance. The people are frightened. Can't say I blame them. The Carvers haunted us long before you came along. Inside, warmth greeted them. A woman, Harlan's wife, Margaret, hurried forward with linens and herbs. She helped Eleanor ease Nathaniel onto a cot, her hands surprisingly steady for someone who must have felt the same dread as the others. Your husband will heal, she murmured, though her eyes flicked to the dagger Eleanor clutched, her mouth tightening. She did not ask about it. As Nathaniel drifted into a fitful sleep, Eleanor finally allowed herself to sit. Her body ached, her dress torn, her hands raw, yet she could not let go of the blade. Even here, in a place of safety, her fingers clung to it as though it were her lifeline. Night fell over Hollow's End. The villagers gathered in the square, lanterns glowing like watchful eyes. Eleanor could feel their suspicion pressing against the walls of the cottage, as if their very silence demanded answers. That night, the whispers grew louder. They spoke not only in her mind, but through the cracks of the room, seeping like a draught. Bride of the Carvers, keeper of blood. The ritual remains. She pressed her hands to her ears, rocking back and forth. No, she whispered, you're gone. I destroyed you. The dagger pulsed in her grip, warm, alive. A voice purred inside her head, soothing, coaxing. You did not destroy us. You freed us. And now, you are the vessel. Eleanor staggered to her feet, heart racing. The urge to drive the blade into her own chest rose like a tide. She stumbled toward the door, desperate for air. Outside, the village slept uneasily. The ruins of the Carver estate smoldered faintly on the horizon, visible even miles away. The sky above it twisted with thin clouds, forming shapes she dared not name. You won't take me, she hissed at the night. But the night answered with laughter, a chorus of brides' voices, hollow and eternal. The days that followed blurred together. Nathaniel regained some strength, but his eyes often lingered on her with quiet fear. He heard the whispers too, faintly, when he touched her hand. He said nothing, though. He didn't need to. They both knew the truth. The Carvers were not gone. They had moved into her flesh, her blood, her soul. On the seventh night, Eleanor dreamed of the chamber beneath the estate. The walls stood unbroken, the altar untouched. Brides in white circled her, their faces covered in veils soaked with blood. In the center, a throne waited, carved of bone, waiting for her to sit. When she woke, she was standing at the edge of the forest, the dagger raised, her feet bare and muddy. She did not remember leaving the cottage. Nathaniel's voice echoed faintly behind her, calling her name, but the whispers drowned him out. Return to us. Complete the covenant. Her arm trembled. She dropped the dagger into the soil, clutching her head as tears streamed down her face. I won't, she whispered. I won't. The whispers subsided, only for a moment. When she returned to the village, the people no longer looked at her with pity. Their fear had hardened into something sharper. Children were pulled indoors. At her passing, men tightened their grips on pitchforks. The rumors spread quickly. The Carver's curse had not died. It had taken root in the stranger bride. By the next moon, Harlan came to her door, his face grim. They want you gone, he said. The council fears what you carry. They fear you'll bring the same ruin upon us that the Carvers brought on themselves. Eleanor looked past him to the villagers gathering in the square. Torches burned in their hands. She thought of the chamber of the throne, of the voices that would not leave her. Perhaps the villagers were right to fear her. She placed a kiss on Nathaniel's forehead as he slept. A tear slipped down her cheek. Forgive me, she whispered. With the dagger in hand, she walked into the forest. The villagers did not follow. They watched until the darkness swallowed her, then turned away, relieved and afraid. Eleanor did not stop walking. The trees closed around her, the whispers guiding her deeper, deeper. She no longer fought them. She was tired of fighting. By dawn, she vanished into legend. Some said she drowned herself in the river, the dagger sinking with her. Others whispered she found her way back to the ruins, where she took her place upon the bone throne and waits still, a bride eternal. But the truth was never known. Only this remained. When the wind howled through Hollow's End on stormy nights, villagers swore they heard her voice carried within it. A bride's vow, whispered from the dark, and sometimes when the moon was full, strangers claimed to see a woman in white standing at the edge of the forest, her eyes hollow, her hand clutching, a broken dagger that glowed faintly in the night. The Carver curse had not ended. It had simply chosen a new keeper.